Yeah, so it's 7:33. I call this meeting of the election committee to order. Present, we have George McAleese. I'm as chair of the committee. Eric Shaw, Allison Price are on as well. And we have village managers on recording. Arthur Alexander. Oh, hey, Ben. Ben is online. Ben Dunford is our fourth committee member. He is joining us this evening. We have Arthur Alexander as our council liaison and several residents, including at least one council member as well attending. Welcome everyone to tonight's election committee meeting. We've got a decent length agenda, so I'm hopeful we can get underway with that, but we will move to the first item on our agenda, which is opening the floor for resident comments. As I always add during this time, any residents who want to provide resident comment at this time, raise your hand, either Zoom, come on camera, raise your hand, we will call on you in order. If you do, as a resident, we also do want to remind you the committee inbox is available if you would like to send us a longer version of the comments you're making or just a copy of the comments you're making. We will make sure that it is captured through the inbox, that it is added to our files. I know at least one resident has taken us up on that, and we're very appreciative to that. It helps us make sure that we're capturing the comments that the residents provide, but those are also available. So yeah, opening the floor for resident comment. Susan Kahn. Susan, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Susan.
Okay, sorry, now I'm here.
There we go.
Thanks, George. So I appreciated all the work that you all went into the packet. It was clear that people have been working on the instructions for the vendor and the voting roll procedures and all that kind of thing. I was just I had earlier today, or maybe yesterday, recently, sent 2 emails about curing ballots and the procedures that someone at the Board of Elections for the Montgomery County sent me, and he included in them the Maryland State Board of Elections curing guidelines, which I thought were very helpful. So I hope you'll have a chance to look at those. I had everybody's email except one of you. If anyone wants to get additional email, like individually, in addition to just putting it at the council address, please let me know. I'm swkahn@gmail.com, SWKAHN. So I just want to make a quick comment about curing ballots. It seems like in the instructions to the vendor, would it be possible to say, please inform the committee, the election committee, of any non-conforming ballot envelopes as they arrive? Because doing so would not only be in line with what's done in the county, so that you can work on curing them ahead of time, since it can take a day or 2 or 3 or 4, but it's just a practical thing that could allow you to actually abide by the election plan that asks to cure ballots. So I was just wondering if that might be added to the vendor instructions. And also when it says that the vendor needs to tell us within 24 hours of all the counted ballots and such, again, that's going to create a concern. Do you have enough time to cure the ballots? Because if you cure a ballot later, the vendor needs to be involved, I would think, in opening that ballot, because the ballot's over there, and if you get them to sign an affidavit, it's over here. So if they do that, so I don't know if there could be any wording around the only thing that would be added to this tally is if we get within 3 days of the Sunday deadline, if we get or the Sunday time for counting ballots, if we cure any additional ballots, those would be included in the final count. But I don't know how the wording would go on that, but my concern is just that it's unclear to me where the time is, where the actual time is, given that the county's procedures give you up to 10 days beyond the date of the election. So I would hope that we'd have at least a day or so. But anyway, in addition, when you do say that you have up to 24 hours, or the vendor should give this count within 24 hours. It didn't say within 24 hours of what, like within 24 hours of 5 p.m. on the day. So anyway, that was just one little note. And then the final thing is that I spoke with a number of artists who are interested in the Celebration on the Sidewalk event. And as you all come up with plans for that, I just wanted to remind you, as someone just told me a few minutes ago, that the vendors, the grocery store owners and Olympia Coffee Shop and those places down there do like to participate in that event. And it would be good to contact them for whenever you decide to do it. And I would just encourage you to have a meeting the candidate event, because that really prioritizes what you can do in physical space even before the ballots are out. So the artists don't care whether it's a meeting the candidates event or a deposit election, ballots in a box event. But I just think it's a great way to bring the community together and such. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate you sending the stuff from the county board. I will make sure, I apologize, I meant to send you a receipt acknowledgement on that, but we got those. We did get some guidance from Ron going through and kind of providing us with some legal guidance on ballot curing process stuff that I'm sure we are going to wind up having to incorporate. And there's some follow-up stuff that I think we're going to have with him on timing, because of language in the plan relating to, the plan is pretty specific around when the vendor is allowed to start reviewing things. And so trying to make sure that we're able to find as much flexibility as we can within the plan as it is written. So that's going to be an ongoing conversation with Ron, trying to make sure we can cover and address that. But I appreciate you sending over the stuff from the county. Marty.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for, again, lots of work and good thought and the community involvement. I really appreciate the opportunity to, chime in on this and make sure the community is on board and involved in decision making, because that really helps. It's just a good positive way to proceed. On the ballot curing, I kind of want to echo what Susan said, that please, at the last council meeting, some residents came up with a suggestion for some language in future election plans to make sure there is time for ballot curing. I think you're working with Ron to make sure it can be done. I mean, the council was pretty clear that they want it done, and it's at your, sort of up to you guys to figure out how to do it. And I think that there's a couple options. I think the vendor instructions are real important, and I don't know if you want me to talk about those later, or should I address those issues now? Hang on, I can't hear you, George.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself. If you have comments that you wanted to provide on the instructions, I provide them now, or you can provide them at the close of the meeting. But given that we're going to be discussing those coming up, if you have stuff you would like to weigh in, I'd recommend sharing them now, but whenever you're.
Okay, I just didn't want to give you too long a list up front.
No, comments up front is great.
Okay, on the instructions for the vendor, I think they're on the whole very, very good. Let me just go to the page here. I think that the inclusion of a test mailing to the committee to catch any subcontractor errors is a really good idea after last year. And I'm glad that's in here. But it should say that those test ballot packets to the election committee for review prior to the general mailing should say that they don't have valid control numbers on them. It's not like you're actually getting your ballots that day. They should have, like, fake control numbers on them, because you're just doing a test run. You don't get to vote twice. I don't think you intend to. But right now, the way it says that, it sounds like the vendor is going to send you, your 4 ballots early. And that's not the idea. The idea was just to do a test mailing, right? Is that correct?
That's something I'm sure we will be discussing tonight, because I'm sure there's we wouldn't be getting them that early if they did, and it's only the 4 of us, but we would obviously make sure there's only one control number over to us. I'm sure that's just a conversation with the vendor about what that would look like between us getting a test mailing versus just us getting our ballots as the test. So
Right.
I'm sure that's something we will discuss.
Okay, I just wanted to sort of put that on your awareness that you do need to follow up on that. And there's also the question about having the vendor send a couple of ballot packets early to the folks who are going to be out of the country, because that'll probably happen again this year. And last year, George, I know you really scrambled to do that. Are you going to let the vendor know, kind of heads up, that they might have to send a couple of early ballots? Again, it would be at the written email instructions of the election committee. They wouldn't just do it on their own. But just again, that question about sending early ballots to some residents who requested.
Yeah, I think that's a good flag. The problem is the language in the plan this year is a little different. So we need to make sure that when we're conveying it to them, that we're conveying something that is in line with the guidance that was set up by the plan. Because I know the plan covered it a little bit more explicitly this year, but yeah, that's a good flag that we should make sure it's not really an instruction, but we're giving them a heads up that this is something that could trigger that. The plan says they don't mail anything until after the forum, but there might be potentially something unlike what it says in the plan, there might be some stuff that has to go out in advance of the forum. Like I said, I think that's probably something we'll wind up having to discuss.
Okay, because I don't want to disenfranchise those folks. So I know you don't either. Last year, you really went to heroic efforts to make sure that they could vote, and that was a great thing. The other thing is on the voter roll verification process, and Allison, I know you worked hard on that. I wanted to have two suggestions on that and maybe some more at the end. I didn't have time to read it in great detail, but the certification of the voter roll really ought to be done before you send it to the vendor, right? The vendor needs to have a certified voter roll legally to work from. And the instructions for the contractors say that, but it wasn't really clear to me in the voter roll verification procedures doc that it says that, and I think it kind of needs to be consistent there. And this, again, just for the legal peace of mind of the vendor, they like to have a certified voter roll before they start sending out ballots. That's sort of the plan. So again, that means that the voter roll needs to be updated essentially early April, which I think you already know, because you have to send it in to them in time for them to, process the ballots and get the general mailing ready to go. So again,
Marty,
again,
sorry, can I interrupt real quick? Are
Yeah.
you talking about section 4 in the voter roll process?
well, timing voter roll and number 2 says prepared annually during the first week of April, submitted to the vendor to allow time for printing and mailing of ballots. Now that's great. But it's not just the voter roll sort of hit and miss as is, whatever state it's in. It's the verified certified voter roll that goes in early April, because they are using that as the legal basis to mail out the ballots. And so you don't want that to be just a, temporary in process document. You want that to be your very near final. And then, of course, I think this is really good voter inclusion. We do allow people to add their names up to the 10th. May 10th, which is great. That's for new residents. We have had new residents move in on like May 1st and want to vote on May 10th. That's happened repeatedly in the past. So it's good to have that flexibility. And then again, you do a final certification of the voter roll after May 10th, after any additions or deletions have been made. So, but the initial voter roll that goes to the vendor really ought to be verified and certified, because you don't want them sending out ballots incorrectly, right? The whole point of certifying it is to have an accurate voter roll that has been reviewed by the committee. So again, just a clarification on that. One minor detail on section 3, voter roll process. You've got in 3B, conducting the checks of various kinds against all kinds of data sources. And again, the election rules say other sources as appropriate. We also used to contact residents in person, in a handful of cases. It was never more than 2 or 3 a year, where we actually knocked on the door and said, who's living here? So that's not listed here as an option. But we didn't just use phone calls and if we didn't get a response to that, we actually knocked on the door and said, let's verify. And if people wanted to vote, we asked to see their ID, driver's license, whatever, there. And so that was an option that was useful in a number of cases. Again, it wasn't a whole lot of places, like 2 or 3 people a year, maybe, that we actually had to go knock on the door to follow up. But I don't think you want to exclude yourselves from being able to do that if you choose to. Again, that's just flexibility for the committee to really, have an accurate voter roll. There was a typo, I think it was, said something about adding names up till noon on May 10th. And I think that the actual election regs this year say 8 p.m. on May 10th. That's under section 4, 5. That's under section 5, 5A. Added to the voter roll to 12 noon, and it should be 8 p.m. And in section 5C, where it says the committee chair will coordinate with the village manager to direct the contractor. I mean, I think that the election regs are really clear that communication has to be by email in writing from the election committee. You know, that it's not up to the village manager to just do that, that they need to have something in writing from you for documentation, because it's the committee's responsibility. And I may have further notes, but I thought Allison, you did a nice job. The only other change I had, just from a quick review, is to make really a standing document. In other words, take out the 2023 election year at the very beginning of the heading, and take out specific dates that are just this year's dates, and write it more generically so that it really can be a standing document. We shouldn't have to revisit this every year. It should be just a pretty standard operating procedure. And again, Allison, I know you did a lot of work on it, and I thank you. So thank you all for looking at this. I may have some additional comments on it after I look at it more thoroughly, but that was sort of my quick take. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. And yeah, I think one thing that in terms of overall process, the voter roll process is an ongoing one that is something that we're going to be working on up through election day, basically. So this is not the last chance that people will have to weigh in on stuff. I think we're going to consider it. We're going to discuss some things tonight and kind of go away and make some more changes to this going forward. So I know it got out today, and that's not a lot of time for kind of the village to review this. So this is not the last chance that people will have to weigh in on this, because I'm sure it's something we're going to go through. And Marty, as to your first question about the copy before it goes over to the vendor. So what we did last year, and what I think this is based pretty heavily on, is last year there's basically 2 copies that we keep for record. It's a terminology difference, but it's before a copy goes over to the vendor, the committee reviews and votes and says, this is the copy as it stands at X time that we are submitting to the vendor. And we worked with Ron on the language on this, but this is the copy that goes over to the vendor at this time for the preparation of initial ballot envelopes. And then the certification comes at the end once additions, changes to the ballot process are closed. Then we do the attestation certification, say this is the final one that is used for vote counting, vote challenges, everything like that. Because, and we worked with Ron on this, because when it is sent to the vendor, it's not final. As you mentioned, people can be added, people can be changed, challenges can be made, etc. So that certification comes at the end, but there is a definitive kind of administrative vote by the committee to say, as of noon on whatever date in April, this is the copy that is being sent to the vendor for the purposes of whatever, and we keep a record of that, and then we keep a record of the certified one that is used, that is the final one that is used for vote counting and election day activities. So it's not called a certification for the one earlier, but it is a separate thing that is designated.
Ballot issuance document, right? Because it's the legal document. The one you send in April is a legal document that's used to send out the ballots. And so that's not just an interim kind of, I mean, it is. So you have 2 steps. You have 2 finals, right? A final that goes to the vendor, and then the final at the very end, which has some additions.
Yep.
And so I guess labeling them clearly, I guess the one that goes to the vendor is official and needs to be, I think, clear that it's not just a work product. It is verified, and if not officially certified. When we were doing elections in person, we always certified it before a single ballot was given out, right? We certified it before we took it down to the table, right? And then we checked the voters against, our written list. But so, you know, the process historically was that it got certified before ballots were issued. And that's what I'm basing my comments on.
And we did something in the kind of like that last year, because I remember reviewing the notes where, and Eric remembers this because he and Paul had to come down to the office when we closed, because last year the language said it closes at noon, because we wanted to make sure before we went down to the table, we had the certified list. So we went down, Eric and Paul and I went, we, you know, certified this is the one. We created a certified copy that we all initialed. So that way we made sure this is not just the certified copy, this is our certified copy. And we made records and tracked everything that way. This year, we're not going to be able to do that before we go to the table because it can't be finalized until 8 o'clock because people can still be added up through 8 o'clock, but it's going to be the same kind of thing. But yeah, we are going to make sure, yeah, records are kept on all of that stuff throughout the process. So
Yeah, and any changes need to be in writing, obviously. I know you know that. You know, an email from you to, you know, with a CC to the village manager, an email from you to the vendor. Do we have a vendor, by the way, yet?
Michael, that's a question for you.
We have the Electech selected, and we haven't actually signed a contract or anything yet. I'm waiting for the final, you know, guide from you all for that, and then we'll be able to go ahead and finalize that contract. But
That's great, Michael. Thank you. And did the vendor have any questions about the initial draft of the instructions?
they haven't seen the instructions from the committee.
Mhm.
They haven't seen this draft yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Today is the first day it's out. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for following up on that.
Thanks, Marty. Any other resident comments? Okay. seeing
Ben's
none.
hand is up.
What?
Ben's hand is up.
Oh, Lynn Welly.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Last page of your draft. It's just a typo. You have at the last full sentence, you have 2022 VMA council meeting. It should probably be 2023.
Mhm.
And is there a planned mailing date for the official ballots to be mailed to the residents and qualified voters?
We don't have one yet. The plan is pretty specific that it has to be after the candidate forum. And because we don't have candidates, we can't schedule a candidate forum yet. So that's not going to be something we know yet. But what we do have in our communications planning approach is kind of like last year where we had around the timing where we were able to say ballots are going to be appearing. This is what the outside of the envelope looks like. And that went out in the Friday recaps, the newsletters, et cetera. We'll have that this year where we'll be telling people ballots have been mailed, start expecting to see them in your mailbox. And I'm sure we'll probably send out, depending on exact timing, either a separate email or something in the Friday roundup that says ballots have started arriving, but we don't have, there's not an official date where it's, you know, ballots are mailed on May 1. It's going to be, we're going to try and mail them, I think, as close to right after the forum as possible to give people maximum time to fill them out, get them sent back. But because we don't have a forum date yet, we can't. We don't have a date yet, but the forum, they have to go after the forum, and the forum has to be the back half of April. So we don't have a date yet.
This at some point you'll have enough information to know when there can be a mailing date. Could that then be designated as a specific date?
Well, so what we get is, it's not something that is like kind of pre-planned. It's, we coordinate with the vendor. Once we have the forum date and everything, that they give us the heads up, and then we help communicate, this is the day that they have been mailed. But we don't have one that gets planned in advance.
No, I'm not asking for advance, but what I'm saying is when all the ducks are in a row, that then, you know, you really have a handle on it, and that a date could be specified. And for all of us to know that.
I think it'd be something we'd wind up probably having to coordinate with the vendor about if that's something that's going to be able to be planned, but we'll look into
Well,
it.
I'm not saying it's not a plan, that you've communicated all this stuff with the vendor. The vendor and you are agreed that all the ducks are in a row, and that therefore you've agreed at the date as to when the ballots for the residents to use will be mailed out, that we could know what that agreed to date is.
I'll look into it and see what is possible with the vendors, but at the very least, like I said, we will communicate when the ballots, kind of the day that they go out, the vendor notifies us and we will make sure that that is, at the very least, I can promise that will be communicated. And I'll look into whether or not that's something we're able to organize and set in advance with the vendor.
All right. And you're talking about receiving the sample draft ballot from the vendor 2 weeks before the planned mailing date. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
I'm reading a specification for the ballot packet.
Oh, yeah, that's not the mailed versions. That's the at least 2 weeks in advance. What that is they email us. In years past, it was a PDF of this is the draft ballot packet that we were going to send to the printer. It's the ballot packet, it's the envelope, it's samples of the ballots, etc. And we get electronic copies of those at least 2 weeks in advance. So that gives the committee a chance to review and we can spot if there's any typos, if the logos.
I understand that. Then following that, once you've had your review, then you communicate back to the vendor that you approve it, right?
Yes.
And in the paragraph above that, you're giving yourselves 24 hours for the approval. Is that really enough time for you guys?
So that 24 hours is a different approval. The 24 hours, so the 2 weeks in advance, we get the electronic copy. We have a chance to review. We've got plenty of time. That comes 2 weeks earlier because we want to make sure we've got enough time to go through it. The 24 hours applies to the physical mailed copy that we put in this year to catch the problem we had last year where the draft, all the electronic drafts we got looked great. The problem was that they sent it to their printer and the printer printed it and mailed it, but the printer had taken the prepaid stuff off of it. And that's where the problem cropped up. So the 24 hours only applies to, we get the physical hard copies of the mailed envelopes first. And that, I think 24 hours is sufficient time because we're not having to re-review the language and wordsmith and everything. That's just, do these printed copies line up with the thing we've already reviewed and approved?
Right. I understand what you're saying. It's just that in what I'm reading, there's no clarification that one is different than the other. There, maybe there could be some language in there that would say one is hard copy and one is electronic, and that they're handled in a different way. It's not really clear.
Okay. Thanks, Lynn.
I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Susan Kahn, I see your hand is up again.
Yeah, this will only take a second. I realized that I had mentioned it might be useful to tell the vendor something like, please inform the committee of any non-conforming ballot envelopes as they arrive. And if that seems like too much back and forth, or you don't want them to have to communicate too many times with you, at the very least, if there could be like one line that just says, I mean, this is up to you, but 1 week prior to the count of the vote, please inform us of any non-conforming envelopes. So that's just like one kind of run through. And then you only will deal with on that last day, anything that's come between that moment and in a week later. So, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I mean, it doesn't have to be tell us about every single envelope as it comes in versus don't tell us at all. It could be something like, maybe a week before, at least tell us those so that you can kind of get a handle on those and quickly address those and it shouldn't be trouble. So anyway, that was just an offer suggestion. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. That's one of the things that is one of the open questions with Ron, because the election plan says they do that review and it clarifies the date, which happens to be the same night as counting. So that's the one where getting some legal guidance on if we've got flexibility, and then we'd have to work out some logistics around it, because technically the committee has to gather in a public meeting, review and vote on, is this curable? And so we'd wind up having to work with the candidates and the committee members to schedule multiple nights to do that. So but that's something that we're going to have to work with Ron to figure out if we had the flexibility to do that, and then work through kind of what exactly that would look like. But I promise that is something that we are is part of our conversations. Marty.
Thanks again. Following up on that, I also hope that you're asking Ron about, that language in paragraph 10 section of the election regs that says that the committee has the authority to address any remaining ballot or vote issues after you get the initial contractor's report. We have had in the past, a preliminary report. The first year we did it with Electric in 2020. They gave us a preliminary report and the committee had some questions, not ballot curing, because we didn't have any problems with envelopes that year, but about the vote count. And we actually got a final second report after they went back and checked their numbers at Electric. They reran the count and it did come up a little bit different, not enough to change the outcome, but enough to change the vote counts. So it turned out the committee's questions were on the mark to be concerned about some discrepancies there. So you do have this opportunity after you get the report 24 hours later, which is basically you're counting on the 24th. That would be like, by 5 p.m. or 9 p.m. or whatever on the 25th. You do have an opportunity to go back with questions. And again, I think that's an opportunity to handle any final ballot curing, because that's other ballot issues to address. So what does Ron say about that? Did you run that by Ron? Did he have a take on that?
That's one of the open questions we need to talk with him about. So
Okay, because you have that little memo that some residents gave you last month that kind of spells out, an interpretation of that language that would give you the flexibility there. So thank you.
thank you. Okay. Seeing no other hands, we're going to close resident comment period and move to the next item on our agenda, which is review and approval of minutes from our February 2nd meeting. For the committee, do we have any comments, concerns, questions, edits, or motions relating to said minutes?
Move for approval.
I second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Excellent. Those are approved. Okay. Next up is celebration on the sidewalk discussion. Katie, I saw you just came on video. Did you want to give the committee and the residents in attendance, did you want to give them a kind of brief update on this, and then we can drop into conversation?
Well, thank you, George. I was hoping not to, because I was hoping some of the members of the community engagement committee might be in attendance tonight, but they're probably still, dancing in the streets from their successful event yesterday at La Ferme. So they might have needed a night off, but it was much appreciated, lovely event. But I can just give a quick report without stepping on any toes. So last Tuesday, the committee met primarily to discuss and plan yesterday's soiree, but they did discuss just the return of a sidewalk celebration. For anyone who's not familiar with the event, that was started years ago, and that was sort of the event around the election day when we used to vote in person. So this would be before 2020. And so there's been some interest in a sidewalk celebration, some sort of component, maybe in tandem with the election drop-off day, which would be May 10th, I guess, or separately. So they were really just discussing kind of the return of the event and what they would do. Now they would be in charge of the sidewalk celebration. And if anyone's not familiar with that, it was an event where it's held at the Brookville storefront. Usually the Olympia, Brookville, the supermarket, the pharmacy would have like a table out and offer tickets for free ice cream. They used to do sushi, although Brookville Supermarket doesn't do sushi anymore, but I used to love their sushi. So they give out, there's drinks, there's tickets for drinks, there's tickets for food. The pharmacy, puts some tchotchkes out. I don't know. Sometimes the barber shop offers like coupons for, haircuts and shaving a haircut. And then our local artisans sometimes set up tables. So it's a sidewalk celebration. It's vendors. It's a mix of our local shops. It's like a thank you to them. Olympia sometimes, is open to late for this. And it's been run previously on Election Day. But so the CEC would be in charge of that. They wouldn't expect, anything from you all, but, they're there on hand to run that while you all concentrate on, the voter roll, the dropping off of the mailing the ballots, mailing their votes. So it was really just a discussion, just, do they want to do that? Do they not want to do that? So that's really all that was about it from the last meeting. So, and someone was going to attend, but that's okay. That's my recap for you.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
So I wanted to open it up for committee members if we wanted to discuss doing anything or providing any clarification on thoughts, intent, et cetera, to the CEC related to celebration on the sidewalk. And question A, supporting, they have the authority, they can do whatever they want, but do we want to kind of work in conjunction with them on this? And B, if we do we want to try and offer our thoughts on particular dates? Should it be election day? Should it be a different day, et cetera? So anyone have any thoughts?
I think it should be election day and too many cooks in the kitchen. I defer to the community planning committee, whatever they're called, to run it.
Yeah.
As I recall, I think we had like 60 plus people drop off votes. So you have a naturally forming crowd. And as long as we can protect the election process, why not?
I like it. I think it celebrates the whole process. I think it's nice.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I think I'd agree on election day, especially because the way the plan is set up, it's people are coming to do either request a new ballot in person, which we went through that last year and it's not that labor intensive, or dropping off a completed envelope, which, as Eric can attest, last year, that was literally just people hand us the envelope. We look at the back, say, yep, you filled out everything, you signed it, hand it back. They drop it in the big voter drop box. So it's not like, I'm concerned of, well, I don't want too much stuff milling around the table. I think election night, we had 60 odd people last year. I'm sure we will have a few more this year, especially if there is event stuff going on related to it. So yeah, I'd very much be in favor of election night for that. I think that makes sense. The one someone else had raised previously was doing it for announcement of election results, but I think because of the way the plan's structured this year, that gets really close to Memorial Day. And I think you probably run into some issues where it probably wouldn't be as well attended. And so I'd very much be in favor of election day.
And if I might interject, sorry, George, one more thing to add. So I'm also just relaying this because I'm co-liaison to the council, co-liaison to the committee. We did have a resident in attendance at the meeting, and the resident, speaks from experience and also wondered, if the CEC runs this event in tandem with your drop off, raised issues of electioneering. Now, I don't want to talk or get too much into the weeds on that. I'd like to remove myself from that discussion because I am up for re-election this year, and I don't want to speak too much out of turn. But I mean, so there were some issues of electioneering. Now, I mean, I would assume that because it's a drop off, people are usually, they're probably already sealed and signed, sealed, and ready to deliver to your box. So it's not like there's no voting on the spot. The whole point is that it's a mail-in ballot. So I would think that wouldn't be an issue with electioneering. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just wanted to say that was brought up, and that will probably be brought up in the resident comments. But I just wanted to give you the heads up. That was also discussed, that issue, if you all want to discuss that. I'm going to be quiet now.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I would add for that, the election plan does call, like, we do establish a no electioneering zone around the drop table. The plan this year has that, so that will be back in place. So we will at least have that one for any of the candidates. I have never been present for one of these sidewalk celebrations because we moved here for just in time for the first all mail-in one. But I know from reading past years ones when sidewalk celebration coincided with people voting in person. The committee was successfully able in the past, and relying on the good behavior of the candidates to understand this is a no electioneering zone, to manage to avoid, even if we have candidates down there close to the table, they are able to participate in the festivities without breaking the rules. So yeah, hopefully between the no electioneering zone, the rules put in place, and the general good behavior of the candidates, that we will avoid that hopefully becoming a problem. But perfect. Anything else on sidewalk on the celebration on the sidewalk discussion? Okay. I'll send an email over to the CEC and just kind of let them know what we talked about. And Katie, I trust you will at whatever their next meeting is. If that is something where they want one of us to attend, just let me know. We'll coordinate, make sure we've got a rep there. If it's just one where, a quick email over to them is sufficient, that works. And I'm sure there will be some coordination in the weeks ahead, but yeah.
Sure. I think they're going to meet the next time in April, but I think that's TBD. So yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Next item is instructions to the vendor. Eric, thanks for taking a first cut at this. I appreciate it. I appreciate you getting these over.
I should give Naomi credit for having forwarded last year's.
Yeah.
Made my life a lot easier.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for that. And a retroactive thanks to everyone who was on the committee with us last year, because I remember there was a lot of time spent building this out last year. So hopefully I'm glad this year was a little lighter lift. So for the committee, residents flagged a couple of things. I think we've all collectively flagged a few things, but wanted to make sure we had a chance to kind of discuss these updated instructions, any potential changes, any of the outstanding issues kind of we wanted to cover. So anyone have anything they wanted to start with? I did want to flag, and this builds on something we talked about during the I talked about during the resident comment period, which is in the first two sentences where it talks about we'll verify and certify the role before sending it to the vendor. Just updating that to make sure that's in line with the voter roll development procedures and the conversation with Ron. I know it's a little bit pedantic, but it's just making sure the terminology aligns across all of our product. So I think that the way the voter roll process describes it is we vote to approve that copy of the one. So I think I'm just making that update in the language, but that's I think just a small a small technical edit that I would recommend.
I do think we have to decide if the sample ballots that are coming to us are actual ballots, or are they going to be, as was suggested, just with a bad number, just for us to see.
Yeah,
It should be John Smith ballots. You know, generic.
yeah, I think that's very doable. I think last year it was, yeah, one of the ones, the actual ballot control numbers are not random, but they're definitely bigger. And so I think last year Niles had at least one that was mailed that was just like ballot control number 00000 that was never, it was not a valid one, but that was on like the printed copy that we had to use for stuff. So yeah, I think that makes sense to saying, updating that language to say these are not our live ballots, these are just dummy ballots. It's 4 of us. I think the printing and mailing cost is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1.80. So especially because the return postage, whatever. I don't know, Michael, I'm sure that'll be a conversation with them about is it's actual like stamped envelopes or if it's the pre-printed postage stuff that gets only we get charged if those ballots actually get returned or what. But I think either way, I'm in favor of it just being the dummy ballots.
Yeah, I did speak to the Electech about this, and they were saying that it's pretty easy for them to do a watermark that says sample ballot on it, and that's what they were anticipating us to do. And then, yeah, and that's not a problem. And then the postage is an open question. It's apparently if we want to get the pre-printed postage on there, that only charges us if it is mailed. We have to set that up with the post office versus if they are buying stamps and put it pre-stamping every single envelope, we're paying up front, but we don't have to, they can do that part. We don't have to do it. So that's kind of the decision point there.
Okay. Before we loop to that, the one I would ask that might be worth following up with them is they can do the sample ones. And if we're getting mailed dummy ones, asking them if it's possible, and this obviously is not a deal breaker because I know it's only 4 or whatever, and we approve rotational ones, but if it's possible that the ones that get mailed out to us are different copies, I think is how they've described it in the past, where it's like ballot A is candidate's name in this order, ballot B is rotated. And so asking if it's possible that the sample comes to us is George gets an A, Allison gets a B, Eric gets a C, Ben gets a D, just to make sure that, as they're getting mailed, we're seeing the rotational printing. But I know that's not, that's something that we catch during the electronic screening, but if it's possible to do it, fantastic. If it's going to be a big pain in the butt, I'd say we don't need to worry as much about that in the samples, but. Michael, for the postage thing, is that something we as the committee discuss, or is that like you and the council discussing?
That's a good question. I think I'm going to take whatever you all produce today off of this for the directions for the election service provider, and I'm going to have another conversation with them. And then I can come back with, I guess, to the council about the cost benefit analysis of doing the 2 different options. It doesn't seem to have much of a difference for me. There will be prepaid postage on every single thing, so people can drop it in the mail or they can bring it by on May 10th. That seems pretty straightforward. So,
yep.
Hey, Michael, can you ask them about curing as ballots come in? I'm just concerned they would wait for them to pile up before they'd start, and whether that would involve an extra fee.
Yeah, I can ask about the fee as far as curing ballots goes. My understanding is the question is really about the plans, whether we're allowed to start curing the ballots prior to. But if we indeed are, then or we can do it over several different nights. then yeah, I can ask them about what that looks like for their respective.
Yeah, I think the baseline question is, are we permitted to do it under the rules? Then if we are permitted to do it, then it gets into, okay, now is that logistically feasible from a committee, council, vendor standpoint? And then once we have all those, then it's the determination, okay, what is the plan? I'd be with Eric. I'd at least ask them, because if that's something where they come back and say, yeah, we can do as it comes in, but it's going to be X additional dollars, et cetera, then that turns into a separate conversation. Or if it's or if it's fully like not feasible. I know once we get into ballot return stuff, I know they are checking the box every day, or the PO box every day. So it's at least not something where they don't go and they don't open the box until we get to vote counting day. So yeah, I have no preference on if it's prepaid one versus prepaid charged to us versus paying and they stamp everything before it goes in. I have no preference. So I'm perfectly happy just to deferring to Michael and the council to work out the cost benefit on that side. Any other comments, things we want to discuss on the draft instructions? I think the other one that was flagged during resident comment period is in ballot return envelopes and vote counting. Section 5, when it says within 24 hours. Michael, that's probably something that goes into the contract, right?
The
So
time
ballot
period?
return envelopes and vote counting, sub bullet 5, it says within 24 hours, provide the committee with a complete certified official count of ballot report of all votes received. And a resident raised the question about 24 hours from when. I think last year we treated it as from the end of the vote counting session. Because I remember we had to note like what time things wrapped up. And so technically they had until 9:45 the next night or whatever. But is that something that needs to be clarified in the instructions or in the contract of 24 hours of when, or is it, by
I'll have
opening
to
of business 2 business days later, et cetera?
Yeah, I'll have to review that, what gets included in the actual contract versus what is just included on the directions to them that they agreed to,
Yeah, that seems like a contract language, but yeah, just whatever it is. So okay. Anything else committee members want to discuss on this? All right. So what I would recommend is, if we are good with this, with those changes, we follow the general practice of we vote, we say yay, we're good with these, pending the changes we discussed, we kind of go away, we update the draft language, and we can circulate and kind of just get the thumbs up of yes, does this match our the changes that we agreed to, because these are pretty minor edits, and then we will have an official copy. Is everyone good with that?
Yes.
All right. Do I have a motion to accept these pending the changes that were discussed during the meeting tonight?
So moved.
Do I have a second? I second. Hearing that one. All in favor? Aye.
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 Eric votes aye. Excellent. All opposed? Excellent. Excellent. So that is instructions. Next up, we have voter roll development procedures. Allison, again, thank you so much for taking a first cut at these. Do you want to walk through just kind of off the top, kind of your process, anything big you wanted to flag before we jump into discussion of it?
Sure. Process was to try to eliminate some of the redundancy and just to try to make the steps a little clearer. I do think the point about having it be evergreen and taking out the dates is important, and I think we should do that. I struggled with what the language of some of that should be. In other words, if you're trying to make it, is it X number of days from the election day? So I struggled with that, and so I made no changes there. And I didn't do it, but I did think that it could potentially be simplified if we, instead of enumerating each type of issue that could arise, if we just treated all issues as this is the process when you have an issue. I didn't do it. I stuck with the model that was there and just tried to make it a little clearer. But it is something that I toyed with. And since I didn't have the history of why it was the way it was, I didn't make any changes or propose changes.
You're talking about the challenges in section 7. right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are listed that way because last year when we were developing the procedures in conversation with Ron, he was kind of pretty explicit about like, these are the types of permissible challenges under state law. State law winds up governing this stuff. And so it's like, these are the permissible types of challenges. And I'm pretty sure I did the initial draft on these, and I think I broke them out just purely because I ran into the problem of like trying to make it one section. I wound up with like sub bullets on sub bullets clarifying, because people are allowed to raise challenges on certain things versus not other things in notification, that it got a little awkward from trying to do it that way, but it's also very awkward splitting them out separately. I think it's just an awkward section.
It's just so long, but I don't have a strong opinion, and I didn't try it, so I'll take your word for it that you tried it.
Yeah. And then for the evergreen one, I think the only reason why I didn't strip the dates out last year was a little bit of just like the one where it's like, you're going to wind up having to update it anyway, because it's almost never exact dates, because then it runs into the one where it's like all of a sudden the nominations period closes on a Sunday and we wanted them to be during the week. And so we just wound up saying like, it's evergreen enough. Someone just has to do the Control F and say, okay, instead of May 10th, it now says May 18th. Instead of X date, it says this kind of thing. And so I think it's definitely something that can be done. It's just one where, frankly, like in my opinion, you'd have to review it the next year anyway to make sure the dates aren't going to run into any logistical challenges. So if we want to change it, I have no objection. If we want to leave the dates in, I think it's a light lift for whoever's on the committee next year to Control F and say May 10th now says May 11th, etc. There are a couple of like small ones that I think we wind up fixing in here. Lynn raised the changing 2022 in the last one. There's a couple of things where I think there's at one point it says, must be raised no later than, or certain things have to be done by noon. It's actually supposed to say 8 p.m. because that's when it closes, etc. So including like, I think last year, it still says challenges have to be raised by noon, which it actually challenges would have to be by 8. If we're letting people be added to the roll until 8, we have to leave it open that someone can challenge someone until 8. So I think there's just like a little bit of cleanup on that. And frankly, like I said earlier, I think this is going to be something, we're not going to finalize this tonight. I think this is going to be a living one, because I'm sure there's some conversations with coming up with Michael around section 3B subsections, section 3B and all of those steps, because I think we want to go through what exactly the village has that we can check. I know, move in, move out. I know last year we used with Niles, we looked at applications for like moving truck parking things, just so that way we had at least the top line on that one. And then also like what public records we have access to if we need to do any kind of spot checks on challenges, or not on challenges, but on, hey, there's an open issue related to this address, etc. And then the last one that I think we're gonna, part of why I don't want to finalize it is the whole top section, because the charter conversation going on related to how we are defining qualified voters, and everything that entails. I think we're gonna want to make sure that's not locked until we have updated language for what exactly the charter specifies. Especially, yeah, making sure we're safeguarding residents, military people on deployment, et cetera, that I'm sure that is part of why the language is written as it is, but we want to make sure that that's all safeguarded and we're not unfairly booting for the root from the role. So yeah, I want to say thanks, Allison, again for doing this one. I appreciate taking the cut at cleaning it up.
I'm happy to go in and try to make these changes that we discussed tonight too. The challenges by 8 PM, make sure the dates are right, that type of thing.
Eric, Ben, do you have anything?
I'm good.
Me too.
Okay. So Allison, you'll make those changes, and then Michael, I think we'll probably want to do an email back and forth with you on trying to find out what exactly resources we, either you as the village manager or we as the committee, would have access to. So that way, in advance of when we take our next run through this, we can have a little better picture of what exactly those public records databases and conducting a check against relevant property records to make sure we know what exactly those look like.
Sounds good.
And you said you sent us the email. You have the current version of the county voter roll, right?
The county person reached out to me, clarifying who I was and making the connection, and provided the form to fill out to request the county registration, so that's in process. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask how long that takes to turn around.
Yeah, they just asked for like what the date of our election was and what the, all of that stuff, so that they can kind of prepare for it, because they're probably dealing with, all of the municipalities in the county at the same time. So
yeah. Is that something where you can find out how long it would take to turn around? Because I think we'd probably want one, if we're going to do kind of some of the update stuff early April, we want to probably get as close to then as possible, and then potentially getting an updated one in right before election day. So that way, before we certify, we can make sure nobody was added to the county voter roll on May 7th that hasn't informed us that they would like to be added to the village one.
yeah, I'll need to follow up with them and just confirm their process and how often they're willing to give that to me. But yeah, I figured that the tax information, and then I have our directory, and including move-ins and move-outs. So
okay. And
I
you
think we'll
have
get a pretty good picture with that.
You have the voter roll we used last year, right?
Yeah, that's going to be in my records.
Okay, yeah, because I know that's the starting point, is kind of starting with that, then comparing it to the updated one, so that way we can make sure we're.
And actually, I had a question about this. Do you all ever do a call for, send out an email asking people to this? We also have people turning 18, so even if the tax record hasn't changed, there's still a chance that there's additional people living in those houses that are over 18.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we did like a formal call for it. I think we did some stuff related to like kind of when we're publicizing the process. We were talked about, hey, this is going on. This is when we're going to be doing this stuff. So I think, yeah, there might be a question for the committee about if we want to do that as a definitive like survey or a standalone email that just says, do we do a standalone just communications email that says, hey, is it a survey where it's, filling out how many people over 18 or in your, reside there, or do we just do it as, a standalone email from the election committee? The election committee is developing the voter roll the first week of April. In advance of that, if you have anyone who has turned 18, if you have anyone who has moved in, please notify the committee via this process and, copy
Right.
the language over from the election plan.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Just they could even just email me, if they're a new resident or a new voter.
Allison, Eric, Ben, what do you guys think? I'm in favor of just doing it as an email and just kind of telling them, hey, if you have people over 18 or new move-ins, notify the committee in the village office under this process.
Yes.
Eric, Ben?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to promote citizenship, a
Mhm.
separate email. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Anyone have anything else on voter roll process? Okay, excellent. Okay, so the next three are ones where this is more of just kind of who wants to take on assignments for stuff, for doing first drafts on things. So it's ballot packet and instructions draft candidate forum planning is first. That's, I think, obviously we don't have dates and stuff for it yet, but we probably want to start putting together some draft procedures for what exactly the candidate forum is going to look like in terms of picking moderators, who's willing to moderate stuff, coming up with the process for accepting comments as they come in, compiling the comments, kind of validating the comments among the committee, or the questions, accepting questions as they come in, validating those among the committee, and kind of settling on these are our question list. Any of the other hosting details, we probably want to start doing kind of some putting together a draft process, so that way we've got that in place before it's actually time to schedule it. I know, yeah, we've had some stuff over the last few years doing it via Zoom where we were able to capture kind of what exactly some of that process looked like, but I'm sure it's something we will need to go through and do some updates on, especially on what it looks like for accepting questions as it comes in, because the rules are different on that this year than they've been in the past. So we need to update some rules on that. But is that calling to
George,
anyone? Does anyone really want to take lead on putting together the first draft on that so that we can discuss it at our next meeting?
Not that it's like a
Yes, sir.
calling for me, but in the fairness division of labor among the committee, I will take that for action. We'll call it that. being
Guys,
my
have
finest version.
we cemented it's going to be virtual, not hybrid, not public?
I think the election plan says that it's going to be on Zoom.
Yeah.
That is my understanding, is that the election plan said that it was going to be on Zoom. So, yeah. Okay. Ben, if I will try and find, if you can't find them, I'll try and find the stuff that we've done in the past around, like, how we did like the rotation and the question stuff. And then I'm sure, yeah, there will be some stuff around tracking the questions as they come in, because this year it's not limited to the inbox, where the benefit the inbox was we didn't have to worry about that. But so I'm sure we'll have to pull some of that stuff together. So if you have any questions, just let me know, because I'm sure I've got some of those files somewhere on my computer, and they're definitely all on the committee files if you're having problems finding them in there.
Yeah, if you can send me the last
There were
one.
pretty specific instructions, Ben, so I don't think it's a huge lift.
Yeah.
Sweet. I win.
Anything else that we want to cover in advance on that one?
Just real quick, in the election plan, it's under point number 4 for the form. It says that the committee will establish a format as well as
Okay.
moderate it. So it doesn't say Zoom for that.
Okay,
It's
excellent.
up to you.
Okay, then that is an open question that we should discuss. Thanks, Michael. Anyone have thoughts on Zoom, in-person, hybrid? I think
I think it should be a hybrid. I mean, I'll just jump out and say, I mean, the council meetings are now hybrid. There's no reason why it should be limited to Zoom.
This is Arthur Alexander. I like the idea of hybrid too. Having somebody standing up where you can be up close and personal and touch them, I think adds to the information that you get.
No,
There've been
no
very
touching,
Popular
Arthur.
ones in the past of that type.
Yeah, I agree there. What I would say is, I don't think it's something we need to lock in yet. I think I would be in favor of making that part of the conversations with the candidates, because I think hybrid works for like how the council meetings are set up. What I would think would potentially pose some issues, and I wouldn't want to necessarily get into, is something where, let's say we have 4 candidates, where 3 of them are in person and 1 is via Zoom, especially because some people are still, having to be extra wary around, public gathering stuff because of immunocompromised, et cetera. So I think it's one where, if it's something where all of the candidates are, kind of willing to be there, but then we're able to provide the Zoom option for residents, people who want to dial in to listen, to be able to not have to attend in person. But I'd say in favor of, if it's one where one of the candidates says, no, I'm not comfortable, I'm not medically able to be in person for this, then I think at that point, then we have the conversation around backing it back out to doing it all via Zoom.
Okay, they're valid considerations.
Eric, man, what do you think?
I just don't want to let necessarily a candidate drive that choice for other than health reasons, which gets tricky. So let's talk to them and
I think it's a let's
Decide.
see what happens situation.
yeah, I agree.
If 3 of the candidates are fine with it, and let's just say hypothetically speaking, or 4 of the candidates are, 1 is not, I think you have to weigh the majority.
It might also be, I think, yeah, let's take it as we come to it. I don't think it will wind up impacting the operations planning that much. And the other benefit to keeping our options open is, I think it's less of a concern this year, but last year, doing it by Zoom saved us, because trying to find a date that worked for all of the candidates was really difficult. And if it's something where people are able to dial in, even if they are out of town, might be the difference, where that's the only way we're able to get something scheduled effectively. I think this year that's less of a concern because we've got a longer window. Last year, I think we only had like 5 days in which we could do it, and then finding something that worked for everybody. So I think, yeah, Ben, take a first cut at the draft, and we will figure out formatting as we get candidates and are able to kind of start communicating with them and figuring out what exactly the details are going to look like.
So that means, though, that, I'm sorry, Ben, but it means Ben has to anticipate the possibility of a hybrid event. Unfortunately, sorry, I thought it was going to be an easy lift.
Yeah, I think
No,
that's
I mean,
probably
it's-
one you can just flag one thing, right? Like, or one
Yeah.
or two
Yeah.
things. It should just be.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna write it up as a hybrid. We'll just see where we go from there.
Yeah, the procedures I don't think are going to be much different one way or the
No.
other. It's just, yeah. All right. Anything else on candidate forum? Nope. Okay. Ballot packet and instructions. Obviously, we don't have ballot stuff yet, but I think taking a look through the ballot instructions, which is that sheet that goes in the ballot packet for everybody that explains, here's how you fill out the ballot, here's how you fill out all this stuff. I don't think we're there probably yet until we finalize the contract with the vendor, but that's something I think in advance of our next meeting, we'll probably want to take a look at those and see how much of that needs to be updated. If we're going with Electech again and it's the same baseline ballot, I think we're really just going to have to go through and just update, changing vote for 3 to vote for 2 and maybe a date or two. But does anybody want to volunteer to take that one? Take a look through on that one and come to the next committee meeting prep to discuss what changes we might need to make on the ballot instructions.
I'll do it if you send them to me.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, I also, like I said, I'm hoping that's going to be pretty much nothing. Like that's if we're using the same vendor, the filling out the ballot stuff is this pretty much the same. It's I imagine if you didn't like the voter roll procedures, they're probably going to make your hair stand on end, but I think it is good to over explain on ballot instructions to make sure people are filling it out
For sure.
correctly. And especially I think there is a lot of bolding and underlining about how to fill out the affidavit on the back and making sure that people understand that write-ins count as well. You cannot vote for 2 people and a write-in. That will get your ballot voided. So excellent. Anything on ballot packet instructions? Okay. Like I said, I'm sure going to be something we have to cover more at our next meeting. Just wanted to flag. Request tracking planning. That was one that I had flagged during our initial sweep. There's and I'll take this one because it's in line with stuff that I've already built for other things. This is basically just, we need a good system for tracking any requests that come in around people are requesting additional, but or not additional replacement, not additional. No one's voting twice. Replacement ballots, people requesting ballots be mailed to different addresses, people requesting kind of early mailing, any of the requests that are communicated over after the initial round of ballots has gone out, where added to the voter roll, removed from the voter roll, et cetera. Just making sure we've got a good tracker for everything that goes in there. Like I said, I'll do that one because I've already got the template. It's just a question of filling in the columns. But I will take that one. But we will, I think, want to have that one once we send the list to the vendors, we will make sure that have a tracker live after that, so we can have a paper trail on any changes and any ballot voidings or issuances of new ones. And then I think that will probably be something that we are updating at the table on election day for people who are requesting replacements on the day. I think, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, we had like 60 ballot drop-offs, but we only had, I think, like 4 or 5 people who came down to request new ballots.
Remember that many, but it was rare.
Yeah. So, hey. Anything else on the request tracker? Okay. Communications planning. I think we need to put together some comms language for stuff coming up. I know we've had the stuff that's going out in the Friday roundups about the nominations period, which I think has another 2 weeks in it. Yeah, 2 weeks. I think it's like 2+ weeks in the nomination period. So we've got the Friday ones. We'll probably want to do some email language around kind of 1 or 2 standalones. I'd say maybe like a week out, kind of a standalone email to people reminding them that of when the nominations deadline is due. Some emails around what it's going to look like for, we need to agree to, and I think we can just use the language we used last year. But if people want to take a look at that language in the inbox, the language for when we send to nominees and candidates saying your nomination materials have been received, send us or your nomination has been received, or nomination materials have been received, or two separate emails. I think we just need to plan ahead to have those, and then the candidate announcement email and website language I think is the same. So I don't think anything we need to do tonight. I think it's just one I wanted to flag that for you guys, that's something we collectively are going to need to be making sure we're on top of, and having those comms materials kind of locked and loaded for as we get closer to deadlines. Anything else on comms? Okay. Before we move into resident comment, I had one last piece of semi-committee business. Michael, the council meeting is next week, right?
Correct. Next
Okay.
Thursday.
So I am out of the country, and I am going to be in Europe, and I am not getting up at 3 a.m. to dial into the meeting to provide a committee update at the council meeting. Allison, Eric, Ben, are any of you guys free and willing to attend the meeting to provide an update on the committee's activities? If you have not
Is
attended
the-
one of those,
When is the council meeting? Could you just repeat when the council meeting is?
It's the 16th. It's a week from Thursday.
Yeah, I'll also be leaving on the 17th, so out of the country.
I can
It's
do
gonna be a
it.
tough one.
Alright.
Allison, you're a champ.
Thank you, Allison.
Don't ask me again.
I promise this isn't the last time I ask you. This is my last time out of the country before the election. So, okay, excellent. That was the only other thing I had. Before we move into resident comments, Allison, Eric, Ben, anything any of you wanted to discuss as a committee?
Let's just document the travel plans.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just let us know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm out of the country. After this, I've got a couple of trips, but none of them are leaving the time zone, and none of them are leaving access to Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Despite my brother's best efforts to convince me to do an overnight outdoor adventure race in the middle of the mountains, I am taking a pass on that one. So I will be on Wi-Fi other than this trip for the rest of the election period. But yeah, if anyone has any travel where they're going to be out of pocket or unable to do stuff, just send it around so that way we can make sure we're not bombarding people with emails while they are on vacation. Okay. Hearing no other committee comment stuff, we'll open up the floor for resident comments. Again, if you have resident comment, just raise your hand on Zoom or come on camera, wave your hand. If you are unable to communicate, you can use the chat function to notify Michael, and we will figure out a workaround for things. So, Marty Langland, you're up first.
Okay, I want to commend you and thank you for a very clear, well-organized meeting. A couple follow-up points. On the potential charter change about whether property owners could still vote. As I think you all know, that goes back to our original charter language in '85, precisely because the decision back then was they didn't want to disqualify people who were really long-term residents, but might be on a 2-year military assignment or a 1-year medical assignment somewhere, or with State Department's my neighbors across the street. And State Department, they're in Germany for 2 years, but they're back here. They're still very much stakeholders and very concerned. So I appreciate, George, your comments about not disenfranchising folks who are like that a year or two, on assignment somewhere. And I checked with the sponsor of that bill in the House of Delegates for the state of Maryland. It's Delegate David Moon from Prince George's County. And I talked to his chief of staff, a guy named Chris Daniel, who said that bill is sitting in the Ways and Means Committee of the House and doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. So we have some time before we do any kind of charter amendment dealing with our language about property owners being able to vote. And again, there were good reasons, as you said, George, at the beginning, why property owners were included. And it didn't, both renters and property owners may vote because we have a population that in fact does get those kind of 1-year assignments or 2-year assignments overseas or elsewhere in the country on a regular basis. And especially, I can say State Department folks, et cetera. Tiffany Cisna, who's on the call tonight, is in Mexico City for 2 years, right? Case in point. And I think Tiffany should be allowed to vote. That's my personal opinion. So, but my key point here is that we don't need to take action on amending the charter anytime soon because that bill is not going anywhere soon in the Maryland House of Delegates. It's just sitting there as a proposal in the Ways and Means Committee and may never get out of the Ways and Means Committee. So just clarification on what the status of that is. We don't need to jump the gun there.
So Marty, I think I'll clarify my statement earlier. That was not me advocating for a change. That was me flagging, since I know that is a question that the council is considering. If the council does make a change because we quote the charter, if the council does change the charter, we obviously will have to update to reflect whatever the updated language is, but that was in no way me saying changes should be made, et cetera. That is just me flagging if a change is made, we have to make sure it reflects it.
I appreciate that. And Arthur, you want to say something, but then I'd like to come back.
No, I have this point and another one, so continue.
Oh, okay. Thank you for waiting. So anyway, I think the council should not jump the gun on making that change until we see what, if anything, happens with that proposed bill. And the prognosis at the moment is that it's not going anywhere in the House of Delegates. On the forum procedures, switching subjects here slightly, I do hope that we'll go back to having live questions at the forum, which was really, I think, Arthur, you'll agree with this, really part of the fun of having the forum for all the years up till 2021, when we did have live questions. And that can work even in a hybrid format. We used to do in person was pass around a basket, with paper and pens, and people could write their questions in and also ask them directly at the forum in person. They could ask them directly on Zoom. And the way we handled that process was to alternate. The moderator alternated between going from a question from the list that had been submitted in advance to a live question and then back to a question from the list. That was the standard format. And I always thought that worked really well. And like I said, the live questions give people a chance to talk to the candidates directly, which I think is important, for democracy. So the other question I had about the forum process was we have reinstated, thank you to the council, the ability for residents to ask questions anonymously. And one of the suggestions was, some format for some way to do that. When I was the committee chair, people would, put a sealed envelope with a question, on my doorstep. But anonymous questions are important. Some of the most significant questions came in like that. And they were really, very useful in terms of candidates really getting into some good conversations during the forum. So I don't know what you plan to do via process to accept anonymous questions, but thank you for doing it. And I'll be glad to, suggest how we used to do it in the past. So just to be sure that's included. And George, that's right. You are still planning to do some way for people to give the committee anonymous questions.
Yeah, the election plan calls that it has to be done. I think the part of the challenge Ben is going to take a look at, and then the committee is going to address as a whole, is making sure that we have a clearly articulated version of that and then a trackable way for that. So that way, if we are able to record what those comments are, one, it provides some ability for people to, if they were curious about what the total list of those questions, of the anonymous questions that were submitted looks like, that would be something that is trackable. And it would also be something where people could make sure that their anonymous question was or had been received for whatever reason. So it's a combination of, we will have to figure out the mechanism that by which they can submit, and then we'll have to figure out the mechanism by which we are tracking. Because frankly, I would like a little bit of a backstop. If people are leaving questions on my porch, I would like it to be something where then I am able to produce a record of these are the questions that people have left on my porch.
I appreciate that very much. Yes, indeed. One suggestion was that you have a locked little mailbox outside the village office where people could put the questions in. And then you would basically have a committee member with you to, open the envelopes that were in the mailbox, but whatever you want to do. I think that it brings up a related question. We had in the past a very clear sort of, process guideline that the forum questions were to be kept secret in advance. Because we didn't want, some one candidate to be able to see them in advance if the other candidates didn't. And so we had a process to really maintain the confidential list within the committee of all the questions that came in, no matter how they came in, whether they were phoned in or left in an envelope on my doorstep or whatever, or came in on an email. They came in, many ways, which was good because we got a lot of interesting questions that way. But the issue is the alternative to keeping it confidential, the list of questions confidential within the committee, so no candidate sees them in advance. The alternative to that is to make them public, to have a public list on, I don't know, the village website of all the questions that have come in to date, so that all the candidates know them. It was really an issue of fair play, a fair playing field that we wanted to make sure that either all the candidates would know the questions or none of them would know the questions. And the past process was to make sure none of them knew the questions by holding the list of questions very close to the vest. But it's also an option the committee should think about. And again, your decision here. Do you want to make all the questions that have come in as of up to 24 hours before the actual forum or up to the forum? Do you want to make that a public list so all the candidates see the questions in advance? Again, just a topic for future discussion. I don't know how you want to decide that, but the issue was making sure that no one candidate or two candidates got to see him in advance, that it was fair play. And let me think if there was anything else. I think that's what it is. Oh, I wanted to thank you for putting the packet up this afternoon and to ask you in the future if it would be possible for the committee to post the packets like 24 or 48 hours before the meeting, because this is, complicated stuff and we're asking residents to read them. And is it possible to get the packets in earlier? Again, this is a great packet this week. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the goal is in the future we'll have them earlier. This one was later than I liked, but the primary things that were being reviewed were in terms of the voter roll procedures, because that was not something that was being finalized. I think that gave us a little bit more comfort level with it. But yeah, the goal in the future is, especially if it's finalized, when it's final voting on things, to get those up get those up a little earlier. A large portion of that is just my fault, being a little swamped and being behind on getting some of the materials stitched together and sent over to Michael for posting. So yes, in the future, I will do better on that front.
Well, I wasn't being critical. I was just saying, thank you for getting it posted at all. But earlier is better and is appreciated. Know that your efforts are in fact appreciated, George. And on the voter roll verification procedures, I may send in some further comments on that because I really think that it needs to be very clear. And one issue that did not get discussed by the committee was one that I'd raised in the earlier comment section about actually going and knocking on a door where you have been unable to figure out who lives at, this particular address by email or contacting them. Typically, it was a situation where a house had just been purchased. And we knew from the property records, which only take 2 seconds to check, by the way, that's a real easy check on the property records. We knew that the old person was no longer there, but we were not yet able to tell who the new family was. And so we literally gave ourselves the option as a committee of knocking on the door and saying who's there. And that is not included in the voter roll verification as an option for you guys, and probably it should be, just not to forestall any procedures that you might want to follow. And in terms of the notification, we did have a process back in the old days under Frank Carell and up through 2020 of actually very actively soliciting residents' input for new people on the voter roll, teenagers who just turned 18, and very clear that they needed to send an email to the committee with a copy of the kid's driver's license or whatever, the documentation is required before you can add somebody. But also additional relatives. We had grandparents moving in, we had sisters and cousins moving in, and also moving out. So you know, grandpa used to live here, but now he's in the nursing home. Well, he goes off the voter roll, but you almost need to check with the resident. The voter roll is not the same as the directory. I think you all know that. The directory lists 1 or 2 people at each address, and the voter roll may have 4 or 5. And the impetus to really have active community participation in updating the voter roll was, as you said, Eric, earlier, really a good civics lesson. It was a good reminder that we have a right to vote, and that's precious. And it got people sort of involved in thinking about the election in early April, even late March, is when we would really do the push in late March to, we actually had street captains one year, as I recall, walk around a flyer saying, if you have somebody new who's eligible to vote, you know, please give us the documentation because the committee would like to hear from you now. And we really, it was kind of fun. People got excited. We actually added quite a few people to the voter roll who deserved to be on the voter roll. You know, grandpa had moved in and little Joey was now 18. And it really got people kind of excited about the election early in the process, which is nice, you know, to have people pay attention to the candidates and care what happens here. So Eric, I take your point about civic engagement and encourage you to do active community engagement in updating the voter roll. It's a community project, and community assistance, you know, should be welcomed. That's what I got for now.
Thanks, Marty. On the forum question stuff, that's going to be something we'll wind up discussing at the next meeting in terms of publicizing the questions. I imagine no matter what, it's going to be publicizing just the questions that if it were something where questions were being publicized in advance, I imagine it would just be the questions that are projected to be asked at the forum. Speaking from experience over the last few years, we got way more questions than we could use, and several of the questions were inflammatory or prejudicial. So obviously we would not ever want to be publicizing those. It is something that was raised last year during our lessons learned conversation. There's pros and cons for both in terms of notifying, giving the candidates kind of a preview of either the exact questions or subject areas, or keeping it secret, but no matter what, it is going to apply across the board to all candidates. That I'm sure that is going to be a conversation at our next meeting about sharing the actual questions with the candidates, sharing these are the 6 topic areas that the questions will cover, or providing no details, but that will be discussed at the next meeting, I'm sure.
Okay,
Arthur,
quick
I saw your
3
hand is up.
points. Yeah, just for consideration, the live questions at the candidate forum really do liven the event. The canned questions, you kind of read them and it's kind of deadens the activity. So just a consideration. Picking up on a point that Marty mentioned on encouraging people to let you know when people are turning 18 and so on. This is a point I raised before, to make people aware that it's not just the Maine residents who are eligible to vote. Anyone for whom Martin's Addition is a residence, and these could be caregivers, it could be housekeepers, could be your live-in chef, it could be your cousin, your no good cousin who's moved in with you. And I think that you ought to somehow tell people that all of these people are eligible to vote if they consider Martin's Addition as their residence. And one final point, the property owner qualification. I don't like that because it goes back to the early days of the Republic when the right to vote was limited to property owners. That has over the years been eliminated, and the electorate has been expanded and broadened. And I think that's the reason to do it. The issue of whether you're away on leave for a job, if Martin's Addition remains your permanent resident, your residence, then you're a voter, or you can be a voter. So I don't think that is an issue anymore.
That's actually not true.
Your residence, if you are,
That's not true. Speaking of, as somebody who's deployed to a combat zone to get the tax-free status, you have to list the combat zone as your permanent residence. So when I went to Iraq, my permanent residence
you do
was.
live that? You don't leave your
No.
older place?
They changed that, so you have to put the FPO address. So mine would be like Forward Operating Base Loyalty. Can't even remember the name of the address. It's back in 2008, because that's how you get your tax-free exemption. Otherwise, you would have to pay Maryland income tax, which you wouldn't have to pay, or federal income tax, which you wouldn't have to pay if you're deployed to a combat zone.
Okay,
Speaking from my own personal experience, it's not a true statement.
we can put in a combat zone exemption. Oh, that's all I have to say.
Sorry, thanks, Arthur. Susan Kahn?
Hi, thanks again. I was just gonna mention, there was a question raised at some point about, we're gonna have to wait till, maybe the election committee is gonna have to wait to see whether you're permitted to cure ballots ahead of time under the rules. And I just wanted to say, since I'd sent some messages recently, but I know they're really long, trying to trudge through those is not easy. I just wanted to kind of mention a couple of little points in the message. It did say in the Maryland State Board of Elections curing guideline that if an absentee ballot is timely received, but the voter did not sign the oath, the election director shall, as soon as practicable, notify the voter that the voter did not sign the oath and explain how the voter can provide a signed oath and when the oath must be received for the voter's ballot to be accepted. And there was, and that whole process was described in more detail when I asked for clarification from the Montgomery County Board of Elections about these Maryland State Board of Elections guidelines. I was told it was answered yes to the statement, the Board of Elections may identify non-conforming ballot envelopes that in need of curing that are returned prior to election day, and then reach out to voters to cure these envelopes, so that they may do that ahead of time. And that the answer to that, or that was my statement, and the public relations officer at the Montgomery County Board of Elections said, yes, that is correct. And then finally, he gave a specific example of that in saying that, and all of this is in the emails that I just sent today, but not everyone, all the residents have had the opportunity to see that. It says the curing process starts the moment, this was written by the outreach officer, curing process starts the moment mail-in ballot is found to have a missing signature, regardless of when the mail-in ballot was received. And he gives a couple of examples of, and mail-in ballot without a signature received on election day has until 10 days after election day to be cured. So they have a time period after election day. And then he also says mail-in ballot with missing signature returned in a county drop box 10 days before that has still until 10 days after election day to be cured. So I think it's fairly clear from the rules already, and that I just want to encourage you to be proactive in sharing your knowledge with our own attorney. So instead of waiting for the attorney to inform the election committee about whether you're permitted to cure ballots ahead of time, according to the rules, make sure that you could also, the election committee could inform the attorney that it's our understanding from these sorts of guidelines that, and direct them towards the wording, because it's not easy to find all that stuff, that it is allowed. And we have a lot of sources of knowledge, not only in our attorney, but of course in our own residents who are former law school professors who are bringing this information to the table too. And when it was mentioned, well, if we did cure the ballots ahead of time, it might cost a little bit extra. And how are we going to weigh that? Well, we have a $4 million surplus, and that surplus is made up of taxpayer funds. Our taxes in this community make up $4 million surplus. So I understand it might cost a little bit, it might cost something surely for the vendor to tell us as envelopes come in, what needs curing, et cetera. But I hope you will weigh that against the amount of funds that our village has, and make sure not to, I don't know, just be kind of generous in enabling of our of our making sure that every vote counts, because I don't want to outsource our right to vote based on thinking we don't have enough money to ask about curing a ballot, or, you know, or maybe one particular person's not seeing in the guidelines that it's okay to do that. So anyway, I just wanted to encourage you to be proactive. And if it seems like maybe in the election plan as it was written, everything had to be decided on a certain day, and you identify now, oh, there's a discrepancy. This is going to be hard with the curing the ballots. I'm not sure that was written in such a way. Maybe you could propose something to the council to amend some language there to so that you could both honor their wish to cure ballots and their original wish to have everything decided on a certain day. So you might say, in order to do this, we think we're going to have to, you know, have one time ahead of time or a few times of looking at them ahead of time to cure them earlier so that we don't have everything on that last day. So I'm just gonna, you know, I'm sure you can figure that out if you want to, but it does require the will and, you know, the desire to make sure it happens. And I hope you'll value that too. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. I think I've said this before. Yeah, we are going to get some our legal guidance about our authorities, given the fact that, yeah, there are state, county, and then the election plan all provide pretty specific rules and guidance. And we want to make sure that we are abiding by all of that, making sure we are in compliance with all of that. Unfortunately, they are not all one-to-ones. So that is one where we want to make sure we've got that guidance, and we'll continue to, as a committee, work through coming up with processes that are in compliance with all of those rules, all of those authorities, and making sure we are following all of the rules and having the most kind of fair and fair election process as humanly possible. So, okay. Seeing no other resident comments. Do any of my fellow committee members have a motion they would like to make at this
Motion to adjourn.
point? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. That brings our meeting to a close.
Good
Thank
night,
you, everyone.
everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank